Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the NRW. I'm your host, Rob Medina, and I thank you all very much for joining me here today because today I'm going to be reviewing the movie Battle of Saipan. So, I had the opportunity to check out the film Frost that was written and directed by Brandon Slagle, who also wrote and directed this film here too. And in my review for that movie, I had pointed out that I had seen another film that he had done before, which I mistakenly called Escape from Empanada, when it's actually called Escape from Ensenada. And I remember when I talked about that particular film during the Frost review that I wasn't really a big fan of that movie. And one of the biggest issues that I had with the film was that I did not think the film was very well put together for in various sequences that I had issues with the movie. But then I had saw Frost, and I thought that he had done so much better with that film than from what I had seen before in Escape from Ensenada. Now I know that Brent has done several other films, but I've only seen 3 movies that he's done here so far, and this being the third. But I did read in a recent post on social media that he had said that he felt like this is his best film. Honestly, from the films I've seen so far, I do believe that what I've been able to get here so far, that this is so far his best directed and well-written film. And everyone else involved with this movie have done a really good job in bringing out some top-tier quality stuff, in my opinion. Now, that's not to say that I thought the film was perfect. There were some issues I did have with the movie, but I will just get into that a little bit here. But I'm going to say right now that I'm not going to get into any spoilers here for this film because there are certain things that do occur along the way that I think is just best for you to see as it unfolds along the way. And it is a pretty much a straightforward action film, I would say, for the most part. And it's based loosely, I think if I recall correctly, on a true story of what had occurred in the Battle of Saipan. But I will get into the plot synopsis again, no spoilers, and then I'll get into my positives, my negatives, and then my rating. On July 7th, 1944, a U.S. Army hospital on the remote island of Saipan is overrun by Japanese forces during a relentless attack. Outgunned and surrounded by the enemy, a lone medic puts it all on the line to lead a band of wounded warriors to safety. And that right there is the film in a nutshell. So now let's get into my positives. My first positive with this film is that I actually did enjoy the overall story that we got with this film because, quite frankly, I'll be honest, although I was excited for the movie because from what I had seen in the trailer, it looked really entertaining, looked quite good actually. But there was a part of me that was concerned if some of the action sequences in the film would live up to what I was so far had seen in the trailer. And I was also concerned too that if there was going to be any sort of a buildup that may not pay off at all, considering that there's a ton of World War II movies out there that sometimes are not always the best, and very few have actually stuck out as being like some top tier quality films, if you will. So there was a little bit of hesitation in my expectation with this movie when it came to really just getting an overall good, entertaining film. And I'm happy to report that this delivered on all those fronts, in my opinion. But the first thing I really want to highlight here is really with the direction under Brandon Slagle, because as I mentioned earlier in the beginning of this review, that I do believe with what I've seen here so far with this film, that this is his best directed film. And again, I've only seen 3 of his movies. So the first one I mentioned before is Escape from Ensenada, then Frost, and then this film. So I'm gonna have to look into some of his other film work as well to kind of get an idea as far as what exactly has changed throughout the years of him writing and directing, that I can see where the improvements that he has made along the way. But certainly with this movie, in my opinion, I could definitely see that he has definitely taken a lot of different approaches here when it came to the character arcs that we get with this film, and a lot of some more of the emotional beats that we do get in this movie. And a lot of it does have to do with the cast members in this film. One of my favorite actors of all time is Louis Mandylor. So there is no doubt in my mind that when I see Louis Mandylor's name on the marquee, that he's going to deliver no matter what. And that's exactly what it does with this movie, along with Casper Van Dien, who is an actor that I think a lot of people who are acquainted with him know him from Starship Troopers, but he's actually done quite a few other stuff along the way throughout the years that may not have seen by a lot of different people throughout his career, but he's been able to do some various works that actually showcases a different form of his acting skills, if you will. One film that I can point out right now off the top of my head that I actually did really enjoy, where I thought he was really good in the movie, is a movie called The Warrant, which he starred alongside, I meant to say, with Neil McDonough. And in that film, he more or less kind of played a villain who was very conflicted, and we understood where his motivation was coming from, considering the circumstance he was dealt with here. And I thought what he had done in that movie, he did really showcase some real emotional depth. It wasn't cheesy by any means. It was very believable. And in my opinion, I thought he put on a really stellar performance. So having seen that movie and a few other things throughout the years on and off, which I honestly don't remember everything that he had done that I have seen, But with this particular film, I was anticipating him to be able to, quite honestly, hold himself in the same stature or in the same work ethic that Louis Mandler brings whenever he works on a production, in terms of performances and everything else associated with that. And I can truthfully say that in this film that we get, I think Casper Van Dien delivers one of his strongest performances that can recall seeing here so far, and really does show him as not just necessarily as an action actor, which I think a lot of people may associate him with that, but in reality as a deep emotional, with providing some deep emotional depth with the character that he plays in this particular film. One other thing I also want to point out too is that when it came to getting to know the characters, I really did appreciate the time that we do have with the characters, because this movie runs about 90 minutes or so, a little bit over if I recall correctly. And I was actually quite surprised to see, with the amount of characters that we do get in this film, with some time that we have with a good chunk of them, not all of them, unfortunately, but the ones we do get, we actually have some genuine character moments that we spend with them, where they have conversations with one another to really get to know a little bit about their background. And it's not just, just generic exposition, I would say, for the most part. It's actually pretty straightforward stuff where you really get to know the characters as far as who they are, and some of the more most vulnerable moments, and as well as some of the more high tension moments that you get with this film, where in this case, let's say with Louis Mandler's character, where he is someone that has been through the trenches, and you can tell he has been through it all, and he has developed a callous in having to just build up a lack of emotion to a degree where someone that's been very close to him through the battles he's gone through is dead, and he has to recover from that quickly and then move on to the next mission, if you will, and move on to the next step, or whatever the case may be. And you can tell that this is a guy that has had to work really hard to develop that skill, and at the same time it seemed like he almost lost to some degree a little bit, I wouldn't say of humanity, but just a little bit of himself along the way, where there are certain things he's forgotten, where he has no idea how long he's been out in the war, and maybe forgot certain details along the way that really showcases the amount of trauma he has gone through, where in a lot of ways you kind of get the feeling that he's purposely burying all that so it doesn't overtake him and consume him, and he's just moving on to the next beat, if you will. And with Casper Van Dien, this is a guy who has, who's obviously in the war, but never actually been in the battles, if you will. He's more or less the guy that's seen things from afar, from a pedestrian standpoint, if you will. And having him in this film, I think, offers a really nice, proper balance, where you see this is a guy that is more or less very much green in this particular field, where he's going to have to confront and kill people on the way to protect the base and everyone else in the base, I meant to say. And you get to see that nice partnership that they develop along the way, where there is no rivalry between them, but it's more or less like an instant getting to know each other, and there's an instant understanding, and there's an instant bond, if you will, that they offer a mutual respect right off the bat. And at the same time, even though they are slowly starting to get to know each other, they start to develop a pretty strong relationship pretty quickly, and it never felt like it was a forced scenario, which is what I really did appreciate about this movie. And I think a lot of it strictly does have to do with the performances from the actors that we get in this film, along with Brandon's writing as well too, because there are some wonderful, I guess, like I said before, character moments that we get with this film, with all the actors here, where you really get to spend time with them and just get to know who they are, to take a break from more or less from all the action that occurs in this film. And as far as the action in this movie, again, this is a World War II film, and I was expecting to have some degree of a hand-to-hand combat. Honestly, I was actually okay with it. It wasn't the best I'd ever seen by any means, but it was definitely entertaining for me to keep invested with the amount of action that goes on in this film, with the shootout sequences, the hand-to-hand combat. When Lewis does his hand-to-hand combat, I know that it's going to be top-tier stuff, and you can see that in his performance, along with Casper Van Dien too, who does a pretty good job, where this is a guy who is not much of a physical man, but because he's forced into the situation, you can kind of tell that he's a little bit green, but that the fear and the rage and that survival instinct, if you will, it just comes out of him, and he's just on point and is ready to go no matter what no matter what's in front of him, to protect himself and everyone else around him too. So you get to see a lot of that pure, just, I guess, best way I could say that pure adrenaline, if you will, that I'm sure a lot of people would go through under those circumstances. And I think they've all done a really good job in showcasing that fear and provide some real authentic character moments under those circumstances as well too. As far as some of the other positives are concerned that I can point out here, Jeff Fahey, this is a legendary actor, and I know I haven't really seen him do a lot of mainstream stuff, if you will, as far as like theatrical is concerned. Maybe on and off here and there, but whenever I come across a movie that he's in, which hasn't been a whole lot as of late that I can recall, but there's always a movie that I do remember watching where he's in, and whether I like the film or not, but I always think he's good in the movie. And this is one of the scenarios here where there's a wonderful moment with this character where with his character, I'm gonna say, where you get to really see this guy is just broken, and that body language and his approach to various scenarios that are presented to him, you can clearly tell this guy has just had it. He's just waiting for his time to clock out, if you will. And I thought that Jeff had done a phenomenal job in showcasing that vulnerability with the character, where he is still a man aware of his surroundings, but is also understanding too. It's just a matter of time before he gets, marked, if you will. And I also think that with his particular character that you get in this movie, you do see the breakdown of how much pressure this is all of this whole war, at least in this particular case here, is affecting everyone, where it's just crumbling down from the very top all the way to everyone else below the man in charge, if you will. And I actually love that kind of a structure where you can see that whole breakdown here, and everyone else underneath him is trying their very best to try to keep themselves afloat by working with what they have and then having to help other people along the way. So there's a lot of great qualities about this film that I thoroughly did enjoy, that I really think a lot of people can actually be invested with here and have a good time with this movie. So for me right now, that's going to be the end of my negative. I'm sorry, I meant to say my positives. So now let's get into my negatives. My first real negative with the movie, and believe it or not, I don't remember thinking that this would happen, but it started to occur to me when I was watching the film that this movie did have a lot of the familiar tropes that we've seen before in various war movies, where you have characters who die, and just before they die, and give their last breath, they do some very general stuff that we've seen before, where give this note to my wife, or give this note to my son, or whatever the case may be. And it's a lot of like those emotional buildup that you get with these type of scenes there. You do get a lot of that with this movie, and I'm not going to say that it was cheesy, because it wasn't cheesy, because the performances were rather good. Because again, you have, at least for me, you have time to spend with the characters, that the payoff was rather good. But I do remember thinking when I first saw the film that, I would have liked to see something slightly different, and then having to see the same generic approach with that, if you will. But that's not to take away with the directing or the writing of Brandon Slagle or of the performance of all the others, because they've all done a phenomenal job when it came to those particular sequences there. But they are familiar tropes we've all seen before, so it didn't offer anything new in that respect. But again, because the characters were rather interesting, and I actually did like them, and I was invested with them, I wasn't irked by that by any means. But it was kind of one of those things where I felt like we've seen this before, and I would have liked to see something slightly different to approach those type of scenarios a little bit better. I hate to say it like this, but better, if you will. But again, not to take anything away from anybody, because that's not what my intention is here. But it was a little something that I thought could be done differently. But as far as something else is concerned with regards to the negative, I will say that certain parts of the action sequences here, and again, when I'm pointing this out, it's just something that I just happen to notice here. And that's not to take away from all the hard work that everyone has put into those respective action sequences that I'm kind of pointing out here. But you could tell there's certain times where if someone's being stabbed, they're not actually being stabbed, and there's plenty of sequences where various actors are being shot at, and you can see the CGI blood coming out, which was fine, which I actually did enjoy. But then you see the bodies after they've been shot at, and they don't have any of those bullet holes there. It didn't happen very often, but when it did happen, it was quite noticeable. So I thought that there was some inconsistency in that respect when it came to certain sequences that would transition from one beat to the next. The other thing I can also point out too, I would say as a major negative, is that I think when it came to the amount of time that we get to spend with the characters, in my opinion, those were actually the best parts of the film. So when it came to the action sequences, it definitely kept me invested, but I remember not feeling as if though I wanted to go back to revisit those sequences. Instead, I wanted to visit more of the character moments, which I wanted more of. But again, with the amount of work that was put into this film, I give a lot of credit to everyone that had done the work here. But the most interesting thing for me was more of the character development, which I think right now, from what I'm gathering here, is really working to be Brandon Slago's best attributes when you have the time to really spend with the characters and hearing them converse with one another, learning about their background, listen to their vulnerabilities, I'm going to say, and also their strength and how they deal with their vulnerabilities. I think that's what really worked well for me in the film, because that's what stuck out the most. And I would have liked to see a little bit more of those type of moments in the film, which we do get a lot of, but somehow I felt like that outshined the action sequences, which I thought the action sequence would be the more I think it is the main attraction, but I thought it would have stick out more in that respect, where maybe the character moments would be pretty good, but the action would be phenomenal, and they are. But I felt like the character moments were much better in that sense for a film that's meant to be an action movie. But overall, that's going to be it. That's going to be the end of my negatives here. So now let's get into my rating. I really did enjoy this movie. I didn't love the film, but I really thoroughly did enjoy this film, because there was a lot of great qualities that I have taken away from this movie that I think a lot of people can enjoy when it came to getting to know the characters, enjoying the action sequences here, and having some investment with the overall story and the character arcs that we see throughout the way. The one thing I also wanted to point out too, which I forgot to mention in my positive, which without revealing anything as far as the ending is concerned, I love the way that the film had ended, where you kind of have more or less like this a bit of an ambiguous ending where you don't really know what's going to happen. You can assume you know what's going to happen with these respective characters that we have here, but I actually love the fact that it left on that ambiguous note for you to kind of just decide for yourself what more likely happened to these characters once the film had finished. So I actually did appreciate that very much. So for me, as far as the ratings are, I'm going to say that this movie is a raise the glass. And those are my thoughts on the film. This movie is available right now on VOD, where you can rent it and buy it on Amazon, on Vudu, and whatever other platforms that are available for you guys to rent the film and buy it as well too. I recommend you guys do so and spend money on this here, because from what I'm able to see so far with what I've seen with Brandon's work in Frost and this film, I actually think he's gotten better from what I've seen in the last two films, that I can only imagine he's going to keep getting better and better and better. And hopefully more opportunities will be presented to him in terms of a bigger budget, more time, more resources for him to be able to showcase what he can really pull off here in a larger scale. So I hope you all will go out of your ways to rent this movie, to buy it, because I really think it's worth your time, and I hope you guys will enjoy it as well too. And if you have seen the film, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. And also, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the NRW, make sure you share, like the videos, and also hit the notification bell while you're down there as well. And also follow NRW on social media, on Instagram, New Release Wednesdays, on Facebook, Nerds Rule the World, and on Twitter at the NRW. You can follow me on my social media accounts, on Instagram and Twitter, Mr. Rob Medina, and on Facebook, simply just Rob Medina. And I have a show on the channel called You're So Cool with Rob Medina, and I have social media from the show as well. On Instagram, You're So Cool with Rob Medina, and on Twitter, You're So Cool WRM. And that's gonna be it for the review, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Until next time, stay safe out there, and cheers.